Hi everyone. This is Brianne McDonald. I'm hoping everyone can hear me right now. I have you guys on mute, but Laura Barnes will be our presenter today for the webinar Sifting Through the Internet to Find Pollution Prevention Information You Can Use. We'll have a couple of polls throughout the webinar that I would just ask that you guys can answer to the best of your abilities. I know there's a few that may have more than one person in the room, so just basically answer the best that you can. And if you have any questions or need to chat with us, there's a questions box and a chat box available. So I will go ahead and introduce Laura, and then I will bring up the polls as well. So here's the first poll, how many people are viewing at your location. And while you guys are looking at that, I will introduce Laura. Laura Barnes is the Executive Director of the Great Lakes Regional Pollution Prevention Roundtable, or GLIPR, and the Sustainability Information Curator at the University of Illinois Sustainable Technology Center. She is a degreed librarian who specializes in locating and sharing environmental information and developing finding tools for working engineers and scientists. She authors the Environmental News Bits blog, in addition to directing GLIPR's regional information sharing efforts. So thank you guys for attending, and Laura, go ahead and start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming today. I'll go ahead and get started. I hope. There we go. Okay. So sometimes the information landscape feels like pure chaos, much like this graphic. Every day we're flooded with information from a variety of sources, and when you're trying to find something specific and you have a deadline, it's even easier to drown in that sea of Google search results. It's kind of intimidating when you see the number, it was 100-some thousand hits, even though Google filters it for you, and from experience, I know most people don't go much past the first page of results when they're looking for something. It still kind of can freak you out a little bit. This presentation is designed to be a life preserver. We're going to cover the following topics. I'm going to give you an overview of the resources available through the Great Lakes Regional Pollution Prevention Roundtable and the other P2RX centers. For those of you who don't know, P2RX is a network of 8 regional information centers. It's a national network, and we all work together to help identify and curate pollution prevention information and kind of get the word out about what's out there and what's happening. I'm also going to do a walkthrough of the Pollution Prevention 101 LibGuide, including techniques for searching efficiently. I know most people start their searching with Google, and that's great. I do it too. But there are some ways that you can do it a little more strategically than just typing exactly what you're looking for into the Google search box. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to talk about how to evaluate information sources, and then where to find information about specific topics, including energy efficiency, water conservation, case studies, safer chemical substitutes, and vendor and product information. And finally, I'm going to talk briefly about who to ask and where to go if you can't find what you need to solve your problem or answer your question, because sometimes it's not on the internet. Honestly, it's not. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is evaluating accuracy of information. First of all, talk very briefly about types of sources. There's the popular versus scholarly literature. Popular literature is things like newspapers and magazines, stuff like that. Scholarly literature, when I talk about scholarly literature, I'm talking about peer-reviewed research, so the stuff that appears in research journals. There are a lot of popular news sources that often summarize scholarly research. I know most universities that have researchers also put out press releases trying to highlight the research, the work that their researchers are doing, and turn those scholarly articles into kind of more digestible bits for people who don't have a technical background. And those are actually really good resources. Although sometimes some things get lost in translation, so that's always good to keep in mind. There are also technical and government reports. Those are often go through extensive review before they're released. I consider them generally very reliable information resources, as I said, particularly ones from government agencies. Trade journals are also good sources, particularly for case studies, because a lot of times they'll highlight work that's going on in a particular company in the industry that they're covering. And then government sites, when you're looking at websites, government websites are generally a good place to start. The P2RX Center websites are also excellent because we do curate from reliable information sources. So how exactly do you determine reliability? When you're first looking at a source, you want to look at, you need to look, you want to evaluate for reliability, validity, so does it make sense to you, accuracy, authority, in other words, who's producing it, timeliness, how recent it is. And I will make a point about pollution prevention information in particular. There was a lot of work done in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s on sector-based approaches to environmental information and pollution prevention information. In some cases, those resources are still pretty useful, but it really depends on the industry sector and how much has changed with those industrial processes in the last 15 or 20 years. So that's something to keep in mind. Older is not always bad. But older is also not always great, so you kind of have to know your industry. And then finally, point of view or bias, obviously, is something you need to look at. Evaluate your websites by determining their purpose or intent. A lot of times, sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. The scope, content, and presentation of the information. The authority, again, an authority, think about who published the website. Can you find out any information about who published the website? If it's really hard to find out much information about the group that put the information out there, then that's when you kind of got to start asking yourself, is this really what I want to rely on? Again, currency, and then accountability. And depending on the industry, older information may still be useful. You need to evaluate that based on whether the process is still being used by your company or the company that you're working with. And the people, for the interns who are listening, the people who you're working with should be able to give you some idea about whether the older information is still valid for their processes or not. So when you're looking for reliable information, where do you start? Most people, including me, start with Google. It's quick, it's easy, it's got that nice little clean search box. So in this section, I'm going to give you some tips for using Google more effectively, and then point you towards some more curated resources that may help you find what you need a little bit faster. So there are actually a couple of different types of web search resources. Most people at this point just use Google. They go to Google, they open up a search engine. When you're looking for something specific, an unusual term or an exact phrase, that's a great place to start. You can use advanced features to refine your search. I am a librarian, so I kind of tend to geek out on the advanced search stuff, but I do think that you can use it, that non-power users can use those advanced search features strategically to actually help you find stuff faster. And then I do encourage people to read the search engine help pages for new techniques. Google is adds features fairly often, so I try to stay up to date. Then there are directories. Yahoo was a good example of a directory at one time. Most commercial search services now are not using the directory approach, but when you're looking for lots of information on a particular topic, a directory is a great place to go. One place to do that is Glipper Sector Resources and LibGuides. I'm going to talk in depth about the Pollution Prevention 101 LibGuide shortly. and I'll talk a little bit about Glipper sector resources also. The other P2RX centers do have sector resources. I'm also going to talk about P2RIC's P2 Info House tool, which is its front end as a search engine, but it's basically it's a curated collection of pollution prevention resources. So there's also the P2RX topic hubs, which are sector-based resource guides put together by many of the P2RX centers, not just Glipper or P2RIC. So some useful Google search tricks. Site search is really helpful. You use site : to restrict your search to a specific website. An example would be pollution prevention in quotation marks, and then site : epa.gov. That will search the entire EPA website for pollution prevention materials. I use this a lot less now that most websites are using Google custom search on their websites. You don't actually have to do this anymore, but there were a lot of different players in the site search market for a while, and they didn't always work as well as they should. It is still, but as I said, site search is still useful, especially if you want to search EPA's website and you just, my homepage, when I open a new tab in my browser, goes to Google. So sometimes it's just easier to do that rather than type in the EPA site name and then search. You can exclude a word by adding a dash. So if you're doing a search on solvent use and printing in the printing industry and you search solvent use and printers, you get a lot of stuff that's not relevant to actual printing operations as opposed to computer, the printer you plug into your computer. So computers is a good way. So using that dash, the minus sign to exclude, is a good way to kind of filter those results. Use Google as your dictionary. I do that fairly often. If you're looking for a definition, you can try the define : operator. It's especially useful for terms that might not be in a standard published dictionary. Biomimicry is one example of that, although by now that may have gotten added to some of the dictionaries. So some more help from Google. You can look at their search tips and tricks page, and then their search operators page to see what other search operators they support. It's a pretty long list, and as I said, these are some of the ones that I use a lot. So once you've done a Google search and you have your 100,000 hits or whatever, you can filter those. So some options include web, images, maps, videos, news. Basically, it's the list up above the results, but underneath the search box. That's a way that you can kind of narrow it down if there's a particular type of thing you want. Patents is particularly useful for me. If I'm looking for if I'm trying to answer a particular question for somebody, and patents are a part of that search but not the whole search, that's actually a good way to do it. Other filtering options include the publication date, personalization, and then something called verbatim search, which parses the text a little bit differently. For more help with search, again, the Google Help section is really great. And then the University of Illinois Library has put together a really nice LibGuide on searching Google, and they have a lot of really good tricks for taking your search past just typing into the search box. So this is the Pollution Prevention 101 LibGuide. There's a link to it at the bottom of the text on the right side of the slide, and all of the links in my presentation are live links. So if you download the slides, and Brianne, I believe, is going to send out that link after the webinar, the link to the slides after the webinar. You can actually click on that link, and it will take you where you need to go. So, I encourage you to download the slides after the webinar. So the Pollution Prevention 101 LibGuide is designed to help pollution prevention technical assistance providers find information quickly and efficiently. It's particularly geared toward those new to the P2 field because we've, in the last couple of years, had, at least in Region 5, had a lot of people move on or retire. And this is this is kind of designed to be a one-stop shop for people who are new to the pollution prevention field. It does include a brief guide to effective web searching and then some sector and subject-specific resources. So, and I will very quickly, you can see where the sector and subject-specific resources are here. You click the down arrow to actually show those. And then the Where to Start tab gives some very brief guidelines to finding information effectively, and they're pretty much the same thing as I went over earlier in the presentation. But some things to keep in mind are use your time wisely. Do a preliminary search, and if you haven't found it, in 10 or 15 minutes, don't be afraid to ask. Links to the GLIPR help desk and the P2RX rapid response service are listed on this page. If you're getting way too much information or you're not getting any information at all, which also sometimes happens, sometimes it's really helpful to have a place to go to ask the questions. Don't believe everything you read. Obviously, check the reliability of your resource, and keep in mind that if you're using curated resources like the Pollution Prevention 101 LibGuide, somebody has looked at those and already decided that they were worth adding to the guide. So they should, I hope they're more reliable than what you would get just in a basic Google search. If they aren't, please let me know, because I do maintain this guide. So, so that's a good thing to know. Use the appropriate tool for the job. Search engines are great if you're looking for information on a specific subject, an unusual term or an exact phrase. And then don't forget, if you're looking for, wanting to cast a wide net, you might be better off with a directory. And then don't forget the database resources at your local library. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those very briefly, about ways that you can get to peer-reviewed journal literature also. And then remember that it isn't always on the internet, although increasingly that's not the case. It is on the internet, but sometimes it's behind a paywall, and that's another case. That's another case where your librarian can be your best friend, because they've already, possibly if you're affiliated with a college or university, they've already purchased access for you. So moving along, this is the GLIPR web page, which eventually I hope we're going to have updated, and it's going to look a lot different. We're working on that. Over on the left, you can see resources. Under that is sector resources. That's the section of the website that I think is going to be most useful for you folks today. So when you click on sector resources, you actually go, we have, I think, about 80 different sectors, and you can browse. So you can browse by topic. The sector resources page looks like this. This is the one for green chemistry. We include news, related conferences and events, and then also resources. And in some cases, the documents are actually divided into subcategories because the list is so long, we tried to break it up. Green chemistry, we have not done that with yet. But sector resources include both online and hard copy materials related to particular industry sectors like printing, metal finishing, or sustainability topics like solvent use. Each sector also includes, as I said, relevant events, funding opportunities, although in this case there were no funding opportunities listed, and regional contacts. So topic hubs are guides to collected resources about a specific pollution prevention topic. You can see the topic hubs developed by Glipper are listed at the top. We have actually stopped maintaining the topic hubs, our topic hubs in the topic hub system, and we have moved those over to LibGuides. And there's a link to that at the very top of the page. But there are topic hubs in a lot, in many different sectors. Some of the centers are still updating those, some of them aren't, but even those that aren't, a lot of times that information, the information can still be pretty useful to at least get to. The idea of the topic hubs is to give you an overview of a topic if you're going into something new. So I encourage you to check out the topic hubs also. So if you're looking for locating specific types of information, first I'll talk a little bit about scholarly information and technical reports. When you're looking for peer-reviewed technical information, that's scholarly journals are the place to go, and most of those are indexed in commercial databases. So again, my audience is interns, so you guys should still have access to your college or university library. Use it. Engineering Index is a great place to start. It includes the NTIS Reports Index, which is government technical reports. It's called from the National Technical Information Service. And that report index goes all the way back to, I can't remember, I think sometime in the 70s, maybe even earlier than that. But that's a really great resource. And for those of you who are not affiliated with a college or university, but you're new to P2, you can actually, from the NTIS website, which I believe ntis.gov, you can search their database on their website also. Some of the reports they've started to make available at no charge if you want an electronic copy. It used to be a fee-based service, and I think they're slowly kind of responding to the internet and starting to make some of those publications available at no charge. Often, if you find a report listed in the NTIS database and NTIS charges you for it, you can Google the title and you can find it for free on the agency website. That's especially true with more recent publications. Older publications, sometimes NTIS is the only game in town because they actually have a digital copy, and the original agency that developed the content hasn't digitized it. Although both EPA and DOE are doing a really good job of getting their legacy publications digitized and online in repositories, and those will show up in Google searches. Engineering Index also indexes trade journals, which again are good sources for case studies. Also, your university's online catalog is a good place to look. You get commercial books there, obviously. You get technical reports. You get what's called gray literature, which is reports that were not distributed through the Government Depository Library Program or through NTIS. They might be technical reports from state agencies. They might be technical reports from non-governmental organizations. But that's a good place to go. If you are not affiliated with the university, you can search worldcat.org, WORLDCAT.org, and that's a really great resource also for technical reports. And worldcat.org is an overlay for the OCLC database, which is a collaborative of hundreds, possibly thousands at this point, of libraries, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. And they all kind of come together. They put all their, if you're an OCLC member, you add your holdings to the OCLC database, and then they're more easily discoverable by people like yourselves. And if you do identify something in worldcat.org that you want to get, that's when you can contact your local library. You know, if you're affiliated with a college or university, I recommend using the college or university library. But if you find something in OCLC, your local public library can get those things for you on interlibrary loan, often at no charge. So even if you don't have an organizational library or a college or university library, your local public library should be able to help you out. And then ask your librarian about other databases because they know their resources better than anybody. Again, for those of you who aren't affiliated with a college or university library, or you just you like Google, Google Scholar is a great alternative for locating scholarly articles. And again, if you identify something at Google Scholar that you want to get a copy of and it's behind a paywall, which is entirely possible, you can do that through your local public library also. They're in our library loan service. So I'm going to talk about case studies, but first I want to talk about alternative terminology when you're searching for case studies, because not everybody calls a case study a case study. Sometimes they call them a success story. Sometimes they're called best practices, best management practices, examples, model practices, templates. Any or all of those could be terms for what we sort of think of as case studies, which I'm defining loosely as examples of things that companies or organizations have done to be more sustainable. Obviously, a case study a lot of times has a lot more an actual case study has a lot more detail. A success story tends to be more, this is how we did good. Both types of information, though, can be really useful. So keep that in mind when you're searching. If you're not finding what you want using one term, try to think of alternatives for whatever term it is you're searching for. So I do have a case studies data page in the P2 101 LibGuide. It includes tips for searching case studies, as well as a link to various case study compilations covering P2, energy efficiency, green chemistry, and other sustainability topics. I'm always adding to this, I'm always adding to the guide as a whole. So if I identify something new, I'll put it in there. So it's something that, you know, keep checking. And if you run across something that looks useful that's not listed in there, email me, because I'm always looking for good stuff to put in there. So some case study search tips. If you're searching Glipper, you can see up on the left around with the green circle, we have a search box on the Glipper website. It's run by Google Custom Search. Because case study and success story are both specific document types in our database, you can search on case study, and then, you know, like if you're searching for metal finishing case study, search for metal finish. If you type in metal finishing case study in the box, you're going to get a list of metal finishing case studies. It does search the entire website. It doesn't just search sector resources, so you may end up with news items, you may end up with funding opportunities, and other things like that. For P2 Info House, and Rick or Brianne, you can correct me if this is wrong, but this is the way it worked the last time I searched it. Put case study or success story, use case study in quotes, and then or it together with success story, include quotation marks so you're searching for the phrase. And then when you're searching for industry-specific documents, use parentheses around the case study or success story part and type in the industry name. If the industry or process has more than one word, remember to use quotation marks to search for that phrase. Otherwise, you're going to get metal and finishing, which is different than metal. A lot of times you'll get more you'll get more hits, more irrelevant hits if you search for metal finishing in quotation marks. Moving on, another good place to look for case studies is the Zero Waste Network's case study database. Zero Waste Network is the Region 6 P2RX Center. They have developed a case study database that includes over 500 documents, primarily from companies in the Region 6 states, although they are adding case studies from other regions now. I think most of the centers are contributing case studies. The database is browsable by industry, process type, waste, company, state or regional center, and year submitted. So you can put quite a lot of filters on there to get what you want. And And there's some good stuff in there. So it's definitely worth taking a look at. Some other terms for safer chemical alternatives. Those include green chemicals, less toxic, less hazardous, green solvents if you're looking for a specific type of thing, chemical substitution, designed for environment, and EPA's new Safer Chemical Alternatives program is called Safer Choice. So that's one that's going to start popping up. Cleaner alternatives, industrial ecology, which usually includes which includes safer chemical alternatives, but is a broader topic in and of itself. Product substitution, green engineering is often used interchangeably with green chemistry. They're kind of different things. Green engineering is more the implementation of green chemistry practices, or of green chemicals, safer chemical alternatives. Again, there's a page on green chemistry and engineering in the P2 101 LibGuide. It includes links to the Western States Pollution Prevention Network's Green Chemistry 101 training videos. WISPN is the Region 9 P2RX Center, and they've done a series of videos related to green chemistry, and we have the introductory video in the LibGuide, and it's a 14-part series, and we have a link to that also. It includes links to books relating to green chemistry and engineering, green chemistry resources, including links to databases of safer chemical alternatives, which are particularly useful for those of you who are working with companies who are looking to replace chemicals. Resources on design for environment, safer choice, industrial ecology, and chemical risk assessment, and the links to EPA resources related to green chemistry, green engineering, and risk assessment of toxics. Again, you can search for safer alternatives information using Glipper and P2 Info House. Search for relevant terms by using the search box. Quotation marks, again, to search for phrases. That's a standard Google thing. And then with Glipper, you can browse relevant sector resource collections. Those include green chemistry, solvents and cleaners, and then industry-specific resources. And if you're looking for green chemistry information related to a particular industry sector, you're probably going to have to browse down the list of documents in that particular sector to find what you need. There's not a super good, well, you can search by the industry type or the industry name, and then with your relevant search term within the search box also. But we need to, I'm working on a way to make sector resources a little bit more easily searched and browsed, because I know the long lists of documents, I think, can be a little overwhelming for people. There is also a Safer Chemical Alternatives Topic Hub that was developed by the Pacific Northwest Region, Pollution Prevention Resource Center. That's the Region 10 Center. So this is also a good place to start. Again, because it's targeted specifically at safer alternatives. Finally, I want to talk very briefly about a new resource developed by the Organization by OECD, it's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They funded this project to develop a substitution and alternatives assessment toolbox. This is a compilation of resources relevant to chemical substitution and alternatives assessment. One of the really great features is the alternatives assessment tool selector, which helps you decide which substitution and assessment tool is right for your situation. And it allows you to filter by the cost of the tool. So if you're thinking about doing an alternatives assessment, there are a lot of tools out there, and the tool selector helps you to narrow down which tool might be best for your goals. I know that a lot of P2 programs around the country have had the opportunity to take green screen training the last several years, but green screen is only one of a lot of alternatives assessment tools out there. And green screen is also, it costs. So if you're looking for something that's free, I mean, there are alternatives assessment tools. The alternatives assessment framework gives details about the frameworks included in the tool selector, so you can get more detail about each tool also, and kind of what they encompass. So when you're looking for information about energy and water use, one thing to keep in mind is to remember to use synonyms. You know, sometimes it's called energy efficiency, sometimes it's called energy conservation. Same goes with water efficiency, water conservation. You know, just try to think of different terminology than, you know, you would normally use. And sometimes if you find, if you do find some relevant documents but you're not finding a lot, you can sometimes scan those documents and pick out other terms that might help you track down more information. Again, energy and water efficiency information is available in the P2 101 LibGuide. Those are both subject areas that are very commonly looked for by pollution prevention TAPs. So I broke out resources for those. And then a really good source for energy information is DOE's Advanced Manufacturing Office. It's a great place to start when looking for information related to energy information related to manufacturing. Of particular note are their manufacturing energy and carbon footprint process diagrams. And I have an example of this is for the manufacturing, for the machinery manufacturing sector. It shows off-site energy, on-site energy, and then they're two-page documents, and then they go into more specific processes and show what types of energy are typically used and what those inputs and outputs are. And if you're not familiar with the industry, I think these are pretty useful. So real quickly on finding suppliers. And actually products also. The best place to go, I think, for this kind of information is thomasnet.com. Thomasnet, you can search by supplier or by product, and you can filter results by location. So that's a really great resource. It's also a good source of free 2D and 3D CAD models if that's something that the company you're working for is looking to get. You also obviously would want to talk to the company, you know, the companies that you're working with are going to have vendors and suppliers that they work with. And if you're wanting to find more sustainable alternatives, working with the vendors that they already have a relationship with is actually probably a better place to start, because you're an existing customer and those vendors are going to want to help you get what you need. But again, the product sourcing, I think, could be valuable if you're working with particular vendors also. So in summary, if you can't find what you need, remember to use synonyms. Use a variety of resources. You know, kind of try to get out of the Google box at least a little bit. If you're running into broken links, which does happen, you know, I'm assuming that most people kind of know how to do this, but I'll run through it anyway, just in case. If you can try editing the URL to locate the parent page, sometimes that works. If you're being directed to a specific document, a specific PDF, you know, organizations reorganize their websites and then links break. So sometimes if you can go up a directory level or two, you can actually find the parent page and then work your way back through. Search the site for the resource title. I've had really good luck searching titles in Google putting the title in quotation marks. A lot of times I'm able to find find what I'm looking for that way. And then search worldcat.org to see if a library has it in hard copy, because sometimes if stuff disappears off the web, a library has still managed to archive it. And then ask. Ask your P2 colleagues. You can do that. There's a national P2 email list called P2 Tech. You can email me if you're interested in subscribing to that. And that's basically the email equivalent of asking your colleague down the hall to help you solve a problem. And the advantage of doing that is a lot of times companies have very specific problems that they want to solve, and the problem is so specific that it's really hard to do a literature search. But if you can, if you send an email to P2 Tech, you're then tapping the hive mind of the 350 other subscribers to the list. It's a very low volume list unless somebody asks a question, and generally you'll get at least 5 or 6 responses from people across the country who have worked with that industry or seen that particular issue themselves, and can help you try to troubleshoot it. Another good place to go is your regional P2RX Center mailing list. For Glipper, that list is the roundtable list. Again, you can email me if you're interested in subscribing to that. For those of you in Region 7, I know that there is an equivalent email list there. Actually, I think it's now a Google group. But I encourage you to find that list and get signed up for it. You can also use the P2RX Rapid Response Service. That's a service that all of the centers provide, and if you submit your question by clicking on the link in the slides, it'll actually take you to the P2RX website, and then you select what EPA region you're in, and your question will get automatically routed to the appropriate P2RX center. And we will search on your behalf. We will also refer you to either people inside the region who might be able to help you, or I have posted questions on people's behalves to P2 Tech occasionally. I've also posted questions to our regional list, and then we also share the P2RX centers share questions amongst ourselves also. So if we get rapid response questions that we're having trouble finding information on, we have many ways of kind of, again, tapping the P2 hive mind to try to get you an answer to that. And then finally, ask your local library, your college or your university librarian, or your public librarian, particularly if you're having trouble finding a specific report or publication or journal article or something like that. That's what they pay your librarians to be there to help you track stuff down. So take advantage of that. And now I will take any questions that people might have. Brianne, do you want to?
Hello, Laura, can you hear me?
I heard you, Brianne. This is Rick, and I'm going to unmute all.
Right.
Muted.
I think. They're all still muted.
Unmuted.
Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I hear you, Brianne.
Okay. I see that there are, I'm not sure how to unmute everybody at this point. It's not working. So if you do have questions, hopefully you guys are hearing me. If you do have questions for right now, just please put them in the question box.
I'm kidding.
Oh, there we go.
Kidding. I only knew that I lived in the Thomas zone, and when I found out about this whole image, yeah.
Hi everyone, this is Brianne. Hoping you guys can all hear me now. If you guys have any questions for Laura, please feel free to ask. Everyone should be unmuted.
And I do see that we had some questions that came in over the GoToMeeting. Brianna's going to send out a link to the presentation slides after
probably for,
and then
I'm going to say about 8 years. Yeah, 8 years. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I have a few poll questions, so before
like
anyone
most of
leaves,
I guess compared to parts of LA, are more
we'd
or
appreciate it if you
less a lower
took
income.
the polls for us.
Okay, and then I did have one other question that came in through the question box. Bruce Dvorak asked, the trade associations can sometimes be a source of information. How might one identify possible trade associations, especially if the client you're working with is not well networked? And actually, Bruce, that's a really good question. There is a resource.
It's a little bit cheaper, like restaurants and stuff. You can go there and get decent restaurants for $10 a plate, for example, rather than overpriced places like Hollywood, which has a lot of.
Okay.
Muted.
Laura, I muted.
Story that I have ever run across. Oh, okay. So try it again. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead now.
There's a resource that, that every library that that I have seen subscribes to, and that's called the Encyclopedia of Associations. The online equivalent of that is Associations Unlimited, so check with your local public library, check with your college or university library. That's a really great resource. And you can actually go and download stuff. Download lists of organizations related to whatever trade organization you're looking for. It is a fee database, though, so I recommend.
I mean, my understanding is that one of the focuses is they want to install like local.
Okay, so I think I got all the questions that were in the question boxes. Does anyone else have? Okay, another question, suggestions on how to identify local or regional vendors beyond those that one's client may recommend. ThomasNet is a really great start for vendors. If you're looking for regional recyclers of less conventional materials, pump vendors, I know you can definitely find in Thomas.
Unmuted.
Directory, and again, you can filter those results by region or by state or zip code, so you can actually get a pretty defined list. Recyclers, I think they offer, those may be listed in there also, but that might also be a good question to put to your regional list for email list for tabs, because I know that networking, a lot of times that's how you identify companies like that. Okay, are there other questions?
Laura, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Anna, I see that you had a question. I unmuted you, but I heard background noise. So if you want to, do you want to ask your question? I'll unmute you. And I don't think she's paying attention now. Anna, did you want to ask a question? Okay, I muted her again. Sorry about that. I thought she had a question mark on there, but maybe not. And Bruce, I tried to unmute you, but it doesn't seem to work because it looks like you have to enter an audio pin in order to use your phone.
I think Bruce put questions into the question.
The chat box.
The question box. So I think I got Bruce's.
So if anybody else has a question and would like to ask it, go ahead.
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, Bruce was confirming that yes, he has one telephone for their room. They're using the chat box.
Okay, great.
If nobody else has any questions, this is Brianne. Can I just go ahead and launch those polls if everyone
Yep,
is
go ahead.
ready? Great.
Well, there was one question. Did we capture that Linda wanted to know how she was going to be able to get a copy of the slides?
Oh, yes. Brianne is going to send out an email after the presentation is over. She has that link, and that will be in the email. So look for that email from Brianne.
Yes, I'll be sending that email out shortly to those that have attended. Here is the first poll. There's 3 poll questions, and I'll just leave them up for roughly a minute, and I would appreciate if you guys could answer them before you guys leave.
Do we need to have background music or something playing while people are answering polls?
Somebody can hum the Jeopardy theme.
Laura, give us an example of when you would use the patent search.
I have occasionally actually had some of our technical assistance people at ISTC tell me, a company has developed this product. They wanted to see if anyone else had come up with this idea.
I see.
Yeah, and sometimes because industrial processes can also be patented. Sometimes if I run searches with in Engineering Village, for example, with the patent box checked, I do that kind of to cast a wide net, because sometimes that's you'll find a patent, but you might not find something written up in the journal literature.
And here's the second poll. Thank you, Brianne.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's interesting. Of all the different ways to be looking for information, it's really a big wide world out there.
That's why it's good to be friends with your local librarian, because we can help make it narrower.
Well, there's many reasons to be friends with your local librarian.
Yes.
I think sometimes it can be overwhelming when you don't totally understand the job you're trying to do and you're trying to find all this information. There's a lot to take in.
Well, and sometimes, and I know this is the case, I'm sure this is the case with the interns also, that they're given an assignment, but they're either not given details or are told that they're looking for that they should be looking for one thing, and when they come back say, no, that's not what we wanted, we really want something else.
Right.
And I've had that experience sometimes with researchers, so I've kind of learned to ask on the front end, to ask enough questions to make sure that I understand what it is that they really want. And because a lot of times when people come to me to ask for information, they're asking for things that that they think that I can get for them, which is different than the information that they really need.
I think that's a great point, Laura. It's a great point to make about what is it that people really are trying to find, and what is your boss really asking you to find.
Yep.
And thanks, Brianne, for the last poll. Do you have all the results in from that then, Brianne?
Yes, there's just 4 polls, so that's all. That's all, and I'll be sending out an email with links to Laura's slides and a couple other of the links that she mentioned, and a survey link as well to just kind of give us your feedback on this webinar, and we'd appreciate your feedback.
Thanks everybody for being on this webinar today.